I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Before we get going today, it's been a brutal day in America. Our hearts go out to Texas and the children and families and extended families, everyone impacted by the horrific killings there. It is senseless. We're not going to talk about it in the show tonight, so if you want more information on that, you may want to go to kgw.com and check out the latest, but we'll be moving on. All right, with our program, we do love it when you communicate with us. All the ways to contact us, right there at the bottom of your screen. You can email us about whatever you want to talk about. You email thestory@kgw.com. You can also use the hashtag #TheStoryKGW on Twitter or leave us a voicemail. Our phone number is 503-226-5090. Our big story tonight, catalytic converters. They're part of the vehicle's exhaust system found underneath your car, and they help to filter out emissions that pollute the environment. Over the past 3 years, catalytic converter thefts have skyrocketed. Why? Well, they're made of valuable metals, and it's not too difficult to steal one. Despite a new law in Oregon specifically aimed at stopping the thefts, investigative reporter Evan Watson found the problem might actually be getting worse.
Starting this year in Oregon, scrapyards can only buy catalytic converters from licensed commercial sellers or the vehicle's owner. The hope was this would cut down on people stealing parts from vehicles and selling them down the street for cash. The reality, so far, it's not helping.
I can't imagine that everything's not escalating.
Donna Gramont likes walking to work, but right now, she doesn't have a choice. Last month, thieves stole her catalytic converter for a third time since September. They pulled up behind her car, which was parked outside her work in East Portland, and a man used a power tool to cut it off. It took just 27 seconds.
So you're forced to make this walk to and from work every day now. When you're making this walk, what are you thinking?
I actually live close enough to work where I could actually walk to work. But I know that not everybody can do that. Some people use their car on a daily basis for their children, for work.
And each time her catalytic converter gets stolen, Donna has had to wait months for repairs.
You hear that loud sound pulling up and you just know it's about to be a really tough conversation.
Irina Rusu is a service advisor at Ron Tonkin Toyota in Portland. She says they used to replace a car's catalytic converter once every 2 or 3 weeks. Now, they're flooded with people needing repairs.
I mean, at our dealership alone, 5 a day, give or take on average, and there's however many dealerships in the area that are experiencing the exact same thing. There's just no words to describe how bad it is.
While car owners are desperate for repairs, the increase in thefts has created a waiting game for new parts.
And it's putting a really bad back order on all of the catalytic converter shipments to where we're having to wait weeks, sometimes months for a part to come in.
Gresham police received 600 reports of catalytic converter thefts since January 2020. More than 2/3 of those thefts were reported in the last year. Beaverton police averaged less than 1 reported theft per month in 2020. Now they get a report of a stolen catalytic converter nearly every day. And in Hillsborough, police report similar trends.
Why is this happening?
That is a great question. It's a crime that is committed extremely fast, takes little to no skill, and it's a quick payoff for what they're getting out of it.
Hillsborough Police Sergeant Clint Churs points out the value of metals used to make catalytic converters, like rhodium, have skyrocketed over the past few years. Churs says police suspect catalytic converters are being shipped out in box vans. These photos, taken from an apartment complex in Gresham, show men loading up dozens of catalytic converters in the back of a rental.
From what we're seeing, they're not being sold in Oregon, okay? We think they're being transported out of state and potentially out of the country.
That's concerning for state lawmakers like Senator Chris Gorsuch. He sponsored Senate Bill 803, which went into effect in January, making it illegal for Oregon scrap metal businesses to buy catalytic converters unless the seller proves ownership. Gorsuch hoped stricter rules would deter thefts.
And so far, the jury is still out.
But after the first few months of this year, Churs says it's clear that bill is not the answer.
Unfortunately, and the reality, at the Hillsborough Police Department, we have not seen a decrease in catalytic converter thefts since that law took effect in January. We've actually seen a slight increase.
Hillsborough police received less than 2 reports of catalytic converter thefts each month in 2020, about 13 per month in 2021, and 20 per month in the first 4 months of 2022.
Ultimately, based on the data and the reports you're getting, this seems like it's getting worse?
Yes, it is not changing and it is only increasing.
So, I would guess, based on where we are right now, that we're going to have to come back at this in the next session for sure.
So while she waits for a third replacement catalytic converter, Grammont feels she'll probably get hers stolen again.
They're getting caught on camera and they just seem to be doing it. And so nobody's coming after them. And so I think they keep doing it.
Depending on your insurance, it can cost hundreds or thousands of dollars to replace a catalytic converter. Police say it can be difficult to catch thieves based on their resources and how quickly this part can be sawed off. Grammont told me she's filed 3 police reports with the Portland Police Bureau and never heard back, including long unanswered calls to the non-emergency line.
Evan, this is just so infuriating, and I'm sure it hits people who are parking their cars on the streets. Maybe they don't have a garage or carport they can put it in. Maybe they do, and it happens anyway. And then we pass this law, and it's still happening. So is there anything people can do to prevent this?
Unfortunately, not much right now. Police say it would be helpful to engrave your car's catalytic converter with a VIN number or a license plate number so that if they recover stolen parts, it can be traced back to you. Grammont, for example, is buying a protective shield of sorts for her car, but that costs hundreds of dollars. And other than that, watch out for anything suspicious in your neighborhood, parking lots, places like that.
Wow, just infuriating. All right, thank you, Evan. The saga in Clackamas County continues with Clerk Sherry Hall on the hot seat. It now appears she was less than forthcoming with the public when asked about something that happened last Thursday. That morning, an election observer from the Schrader campaign was allowed into the elections building shortly after 7:35, but the building did not open to the public until 8:30. Schrader's opponent filed a complaint with the Secretary of State, which is now investigating. Here's the problem. When asked about that, Hall said she had no idea what happened that morning. But security footage seems to show otherwise. First, let's hear from Sherry Hall last Friday when she was asked about that incident.
And again, I don't know how someone got in at 7 on the day that's being talked about. We don't know yet. We're going to be submitting the requested information, and I'm sure it'll be investigated.
Well, let's take a look at the video. This is security video from Clackamas County elections. You can see on the top row, third from the right, an elections worker arrives around 7:34 in the morning. She talks briefly with a man who's outside and apparently tells him he cannot come in. But then inside the building, less than 2 minutes later, another camera shows Sherry Hall and that woman walk across the hallway and through double doors. And then 18 seconds later, the woman opens the door and allows the man inside. Hard to believe. Hall and the woman didn't talk about that. Secretary of State Shemia Fagan saw the video just before the meeting virtually with reporters. Here is her reaction.
I saw it just literally as I was preparing for this press conference. And so I'm somewhat reacting in real time, but it's outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous to stand in front of the public and to say one thing and then to have a video showing something very different. So I'm incredibly frustrated. Incredibly disappointed, and I find it outrageous that the facts came out and it looks to be contradictory of what she said to the public during a press availability just late last week.
So there's that. I asked the county press people if the clerk would like to respond and explain, and they said, well, since the Secretary of State is investigating the incident now, they really have no comment. Also, the clerk, Sherry Hall, was supposed to give the Secretary of State a written estimate of how long counting the ballots will take yesterday. As of now, still has apparently not been given. And in case you haven't been following along, there is a big problem in Clackamas County with counting the ballots. The ballot counting machines are kicking out about 64% because the machines cannot read the barcodes on those ballots. Now, Hall's team tested the machines before the election, not with the actual ballots from the outside printer, but with the ballots they created in-house, and everything worked fine, so they missed the problem. Now, about 70,000 ballots are going to have to be copied by hand and sent back through the machines. Well, last night we asked you what you thought. Should the clerk, Sherry Hall, resign? Your answer was a resounding yes.
Learning tonight that Ms. Hall has had some other issues. She has to go.
My opinion, She should resign if she has any shame at all, and if she won't resign, she should be fired.
Now, many of you emailed in to share your comments as well. Sherry wrote, "No doubt I've worked at Clackamas County for her entire tenure as clerk. Yes, she should resign." And Trish added, "Ms. Hall should resign for her history of blunders and the current fiasco." Jay wrote in to add, "Sherry should not resign. She's only done what all politicians do. Politician equals incompetence." And we'll give Donna the last word here.
I've lived in Clackamas County for 12 years. I've been a voter here all that time, and I've never been embarrassed before to be a voter. And now, suddenly, I find myself embarrassed to admit I'm from Clackamas County. I think it is definitely time for Sherry Hall to go.
All right, keep those comments coming no matter what side you're on. And if you think Sherry Hall is being judged unfairly or too harshly, feel free to let me know that as well. Our email is thestory@kgw.com, and the phone number is 503-226-5090. Rights for transgender people have become a political debate, both nationally and in Oregon.
It's happening all around us, and it's happening a whole lot faster than I really thought it would.
Advocates say it feels like history is repeating itself.
And then ultimately, too, that these identities are not political.
They're not political. And if you believe in an individual's rights, then it's people's right to be who they are.
When the story continues. Welcome back. Keep sending your questions and comments to thestory@kgw.com or give us a call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. This week, KGW is launching a brand new true crime podcast called Should Be Alive. It examines the 2019 murder of a Vancouver teenager named Nikki Kuhnhausen, who was killed for being transgender. A man from Clark County named David Bogdanov was convicted last August for the murder and sentenced to prison. The trailer for Should Be Alive is available now wherever you get your podcast. Episode 1 drops tomorrow. There will be 6 episodes in total, with one new launching each Wednesday. As part of that launch, we're highlighting stories about our transgender community, often at the center of a political debate. It's something transgender people never really asked for, but we've seen their rights become an issue in the Republican primary for a governor here in Oregon and in schools. Galen Etlin explains how many transgender people see that fight for rights as a fight to survive.
A Salem rally at the Capitol in May proclaimed support for Oregon's most vulnerable youth.
We need to stand up to protect trans kids and all of our kids.
Nancy Hawk runs Basic Rights Oregon, an LGBTQ advocacy group.
We're out here fighting for them.
The organization is tracking anti-LGBTQ rhetoric. We saw this month how Republican candidate for governor Stan Pulliam made anti-transgender policies a key part of his campaign.
He'll lead the fight to not allow transgender athletes, because my girls shouldn't have to play against boys.
That seems really focused on destroying the mental health of already vulnerable youth.
State guidance in 2016 told schools trans youth should be treated consistent with gender identity and not excluded from any program or activity. But a Willamette Week report shows most conservative candidates for governor would push to change that and allow discrimination in sports based on gender identity. That includes Betsy Johnson and Christine Drazen.
It has become a battlefield, a wedge issue.
Jen Burleton runs Transactive at Lewis and Clark College, advocating for trans rights.
I do a great deal of debunking of myths.
Work that continues.
In Oregon, we have fought over 30 anti-LGBTQ ballot measures.
Basic Rights Oregon worries more could be on the way. The Human Rights Campaign says a record 34 states introduced anti-transgender bills last year, with even more added in 2022.
It's like it's all coming around again.
Robin Will is president of the Gay and Lesbian Archives of the Pacific Northwest and feels history is repeating itself.
It's happening all around us, and it's happening a whole lot faster than I really thought it would.
The renewed push for anti-LGBTQ laws reminds him of Oregon Measure 9.
Well, it's winnable, obviously.
The 1992 and 2000 ballot measures, sponsored by Lon Mabon, would have banned schools from mentioning homosexuality, lumping it in with pedophilia and other, quote, abnormal and perverse behaviors.
People had to hide who they were.
Kristen Knapp fought Measure 9.
We had all been pretty marginalized and beaten down during that campaign.
Advocates had to pour more than $1 million into a campaign to defeat it.
Which doesn't mean we won anything. It means we kept things from getting any worse.
And now, more than 20 years later, similar rules are solidifying themselves at more local levels. One example, Newburgh School District banning Black Lives Matter and pride symbols.
Then ultimately, too, that these identities are not political.
They're not political. And if you believe in an individual's rights, then it's people's right to be who they are.
Basic Rights Oregon says groups like Parents' Rights in Education have organized campaigns around the state to influence school boards
Very controversial curriculums.
against lessons about sexual orientation and gender identity.
There are only two sexes. I know what my body parts are.
Nobody from that group responded to KGW's request for comment, but a member of another group called Oregon Moms Union did.
So much division right now on all fronts.
Corey Haynes is Clackamas County Chair of Oregon Moms Union. She pushed against North Clackamas School District using this genderbread person worksheet in her son's 5th grade class for students to discuss gender expression, identity, and attraction.
Very embarrassed. You know, there was girls in the class, watching what he was going to circle.
The district said the worksheet was in response to some students using derogatory language about the gender and sexual identity of fellow students.
We do need to have compassion.
Haynes is glad the district responded to the bullying, but felt the specific class-wide lesson should have come with a warning to parents.
Made you feel blindsided.
Unlike some others in these parents' rights groups, Haynes is open to LGBTQ and gender issues being discussed in school.
I do think that these things need to be learned. I think that they just need to be a little bit more thoughtful and intentional.
Gender identity and sexuality are things that people are born with, and kids often know pretty early without anyone telling them about it. I know as a kid, I wished I was straight because it would have made my life a whole lot easier back then.
Oh.
What better way would you say these identities could be presented where you feel like that could be all-inclusive beyond the identities that we see in the mainstream all the time?
If somebody doesn't want to have some of these things presented to their child, in 5th grade, but maybe is okay with it in, freshman or, a little bit later, I feel like that should be their right.
No matter the intent, fights over LGBTQ issues have a big impact on youth.
Feeling like they shouldn't exist. And those feelings lead to suicidality.
A national survey by the Trevor Project showed 94% of LGBTQ youth reported recent politics negatively impacted their mental health. 42% seriously considered suicide, including half of trans and non-binary youth.
What would your message be to them?
Continue to believe that you can thrive and survive and be the amazing human being that you already are.
Some Democratic lawmakers in Oregon have joined more than a dozen other states in pushing to offer legal refuge to displaced transgender youth and families. That means families being pursued with legal action in other states for offering kids gender-affirming care would not be pursued in places like Oregon. But with anti-LGBTQ efforts also gaining traction, it will be up to voters to speak up on future discriminatory policy.
How close do you think we are to something like that happening again?
I hope not very close. I would say take nothing for granted. We need to be really aware at this moment of all the attacks that are happening on our community and really putting them to the forefront.
If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health crisis, there is help. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Call the number on your screen, 1-800-273-8255. Detroit Lake has been through a lot recently with wildfires and drought decimating the small town. Well, now some good news about the lake's water levels. When the story continues. Detroit Lake had a rough couple of years. The town was destroyed by wildfires in 2020, and businesses which rely on the lake have been struggling because of low water levels in the last 2 years. But this year, it's different. Our wet spring is bringing back some hope to the tourist town. Meteorologist Joe Ranieri went to Detroit Lake yesterday to check things out.
Well, the unofficial start to summer is under a week now, but people here at Detroit Lake have been getting ready for weeks, especially now that the lake is at its fullest it's been in 2 years. Lucas Lunsky is hoping he hears the sounds of boats firing up in his marina all summer long.
We've already started. We've already been doing rentals and have been open for about 2 weeks now, and we're just happy to see that the water's up.
Seeing the lake this full is a welcome sight because the last 2 years, their season has been cut short.
Well, even in 2020, we got a late start because of COVID, and so we had to wait till almost June again to get open, till kind of everything got lifted, and then we were able to get back to work to get set up. And yeah, 3 months later, everything burns down.
Last year, they were only open for 6 weeks because of low water levels. And just 2 months ago, Lunsky thought it was going to be the third summer in a row where he would be struggling to keep his business and these docks afloat.
It's just a narrow creek, maybe about 3-4 feet deep before all the rain and snow started hitting.
Thanks to heavy mountain snow and an incredible amount of rain,
we were a little worried. It was pretty dry, and then come end of March, April, the weather changed, and middle of April, we finally started able to move docks, and there was 10 inches of snow, and then it rained for 3 straight weeks.
His spirit and this lake quickly became higher.
You can kind of see a line that's kind of even across the whole. That's like the full pool.
Full pool is when the lake reaches capacity at about 1,563 feet. But the Army Corps of Engineers is keeping it 5 feet lower to reduce pressure on the Detroit Dam.
What we're trying to do is reduce the risk of any sort of uncontrolled release at the dam if there were a large seismic event.
Now the people who have been through so much,
right now it's looking like it's going to be a good normal season again,
are hoping this season,
we're pretty thankful for the water coming up the way it has,
stretches until the end of the summer.
Let's bring in meteorologist Joe Ranieri now. And Joe, does this mean that we're not going to have a drought in Oregon?
Well, unfortunately, no, not at all. The one place that's not going to be under a drought as we head into the summer months is right here, basically throughout parts of western Washington and a good chunk of the northwest side of the state. But you'll notice you travel south into the central and the southern part of the Willamette Valley, a completely different story. And nearly 90% of the state, Pat, is still under some kind of drought.
And I've been up there this time of year, and I know you have too, when it's so dry that the docks are sitting on bare ground. It's got to be great for them to now have a full reservoir.
Exactly right. And they've been scared basically the last couple of years. But seeing the water levels like I saw yesterday, yeah, a lot of people are excited and they're hoping for good things to come, not just for this holiday weekend, but the entire summer.
It's good stuff. All right. Thank you, Joe Ranieri. Good news for folks who love to play in the mountains. All right, keep sending your questions and comments to thestory@kgw.com. When we come back, how you can pitch in to help out your community. For this week's Hey Help campaign, we're asking you to donate to PFLAG Southwest Washington. They're an advocacy group for LGBTQ people and their families and friends. They hold monthly support meetings and offer educational programs and other resources. If you want to help out, just hold your phone's camera up to the QR code there on your screen, or you can always go to kgw.com/heyhelp. This is a micro donation drive, so feel free to give any amount, no matter how small. Well, that's the end of our program. Thanks for watching. And please remember, the story, our story, it never ends. I'll see you tomorrow.